Happy Bitcoin Friday, freaks. It's your boy Odell here for another Dispatch. Citadel Dispatch is the interactive live show focused on Bitcoin and freedom tech. We have two great conversations lined up for y'all today. Before we get started, I want to thank all the freaks who continue to support the show, whether that's subscribing on their favorite platform. We're now on YouTube, and we've always been on Twitch. We're on Bitcoin TV, any podcast app, search Citadel Dispatch, press the subscribe button, share with your friends and family. It really does go a long way. And if you're supporting the show via Sats, that's even more appreciated. We do not have ads or sponsors on Citadel Dispatch. We are 100% audience funded. I think it aligns the incentives really well. It's extremely powerful seeing all the support you guys continue to give the show to keep it going. The easiest way to support Dispatch is through Podcasting 2.0 apps. My favorites are Fountain Podcasts, Breeze, and Podverse.fm. You simply load it up with some sats, search Citadel Dispatch, press the subscribe button, pick how many sats per minute you think Dispatch is worth, and then it automatically streams the sats to my node as you are listening. You can also support the show at citadeldispatch.com using my BTC Pay server instance. You can pay on-chain or Lightning there, or you can support using my Paynim, which is supported by Sparrow Wallet and Samurai Wallet. My Paynim is Odell. Very easy to remember. So thank you all for the support. Another way you can do so if you do Podcasting 2.0 for support, it actually will split with a bunch of open source projects as well. So if you support via Podcasting 2.0, a portion of your support also goes to Raspberry Blitz, RoboSats, Seed Signer, Sparrow Wallet, and Zeus. A really cool aspect of Podcasting 2.0. And also, it allows you to send boostograms. Boostograms are single payments that you can attach a message to. My understanding is that Fountain Podcasts are going to make it so we can view boostograms from all podcasting apps. But for now, all I can see are the ones that are coming in through Fountain Podcasts. So as always, I'm going to read the top four from the last dispatch, which was also this week. If you haven't listened to that, consider going listening to that. It's about the Tornado Cash situation. We have Law Bitcoin with 50,000 sats saying, thanks for the work and advocacy the three of you are doing in the privacy space. Privacy is essential to exercising our rights. We have Rika Maru with 50,000 sats saying, Odell Seth is the best duo since Lennon McCartney. Please consider doing a regular pod together. I'm not against that idea. Appreciate you, freak. We have Chad Farrow with 60,000 sats because he sent two boosts of 30,000 sats. He said the first boost failed, so here's another. And then I also see the first boost, which says, keep up the great work. Thanks, Chad. And we have Roughneck Miner with 5,000 sats saying, you guys run the best pod in the space. I learned more here than any other pod. Keep pushing the boundaries, and I'll keep sending sats. Also, huge shout out to all the freaks who supported that I did not read. I love you all. Couldn't do without you. And a huge shout out to all the freaks who continue to join us in the live chat. So the live chat is an interesting aspect of the show. It is broadcast out to everybody so everyone can see the live chat. The live chat, you can participate either on our YouTube feed or our Twitch feed or the Matrix chat if you don't want to use a big tech platform. To access the Matrix chat, you go to citadeldispatch.com and click that citadel.chat button. Okay, with all that said, there was crazy privacy news today. I will be covering that later in the afternoon with Rockstar Dev. But I'm fortunate enough to have Captain Sid here in the studio at Bitcoin Park, and we are going to be talking about grassroots Bitcoin adoption this morning, a little bit of a happier topic. How's it going, Sid?
Good morning, Matt. Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. This is Dispatch 73, and I think every time I do that intro, it's always a little bit different. I used to have it written down, and now I just kind of fucking wing it.
Yeah, well, you did a great job. I mean, you have enough practice now. You can just rip it out, do it on the fly.
So Sid, I'm pretty excited about this conversation. the first time we met was, what, like 4 months ago or 5 months ago in Nashville?
Yeah, when I came through Nashville on the trip.
Yeah,
Yeah, we met at forget the name of the bar, but
that was a good time. We
that
did, like, a spontaneous meetup. It wasn't we didn't have anything planned. It was just like, Captain Sid's in town. We
yeah.
gotta all meet up.
I think
Um,
Tommy made a little piece of artwork, and that was it.
yeah.
We were off to the races.
Yeah, I mean, he made a piece of artwork on, like, a pizza box, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think sold it to Mills, and that's what paid for the drinks.
There you go. I
Do what you
love
gotta
it.
do.
So Sid, let's I don't know where to start here. I guess, um, I mean, you bought a motorcycle and you rode it from Florida to California,
Yeah, with a little bit in between.
and you stopped at as many Bitcoin meetups as you could along the way.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's
S
pretty fucking baller.
Yeah, it was great. I think, I've never really been able to claim that I have authority in any space, but I've been to 30 meetups. I don't think
Yeah.
there's any Bitcoiner that's been to more meetups in America than I have at this point, and I
That
hope someone breaks that
definitely a
record.
Bitcoin meetup specialist now.
Yeah, now I can claim that title, which is cool. Yeah, so I've been living abroad for the last 2.5 years, and I really wanted to see America again, see what had happened. I've been gone since 2019, so I missed all of COVID and everything, and I watched all of that happen through Twitter, and I wanted to see what is the country like on the ground. So I thought, what better way to do that than through a road trip? And I fell in love with riding motorcycles while I was abroad. So I figured, let me buy a big American bike, a big touring bike, and go all around the country. And also on Twitter, I saw the rise of all these Bitcoin meetups. And when I left, there really weren't that many. There was a couple bit devs, but I don't remember there being small Bitcoin meetups all over the place. And I looked at a map and there's like 40, 45, 50 Bitcoin meetups. And now there's even more. As I was going on the trip, I kept discovering new ones. So I thought, why not try to link these together and meet Bitcoiners all over the country?
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty amazing to watch over the last few years because, uh, I mean, you're completely correct that the meetups I mean, I like to call it grassroots Bitcoin adoption has just absolutely exploded, throughout the world. Like, we see similar happening in Germany and India and
Hmm.
Latin America, and it's crazy to me because it happened at the same time that, like, the majority of the world was stepping back from in-person social interaction. So, like, events were getting canceled, weddings were getting canceled, concerts were getting canceled. They were closing down small businesses, but at the same time, Bitcoin meetups were growing, which is absolutely crazy to think about.
Yeah. And it's also completely agnostic of market and price. Over the entire ride, the price has been going down of Bitcoin, but I've seen, and from what I've heard from meetup organizers, it's level, if not increasing in attendance. More people are interested in this and asking questions. And I think meetups have really hit on a new chord for the potential Bitcoin community. There's a lot of people out there who do not want to learn about Bitcoin by reading a bunch of articles online.
Right,
And I think all of us who got in, who are in it now, you and I, who are very interested in Bitcoin, we were those types of people because we had to be. There was no other way to learn.
right.
But
You
we're
had no
reaching,
option.
yeah, you had no option. You had to
Yeah.
just read articles or at best talk with people on Twitter or some sort of online medium. But there's a whole crop of people out there who don't learn like that, who want to go meet people in person and hear, what is this thing? I want to sit down and look you in the eyes and have you explain to me how this works and answer my questions. And meetups are hitting right on that.
And also, I mean, like, I mean, obviously conversations are great. I think a lot of times people overthink it. Just like having beers with local Bitcoiners is it's just a fulfilling experience.
Yeah.
But, like, also the in-person workshops, I feel like are really powerful, like, actually having someone, have a wallet in their hands and be able to, like, feel it in person is, um, it's just way easier to learn that way.
Yeah. And I've seen every meetup seems to start with exactly that, getting
Drinks at a
together,
bar, right?
drinks at a bar,
Yeah.
couple people, but they grow from there. And eventually, when you have a meetup page and a Twitter account, you start attracting people who don't know anything about Bitcoin. And then the workshops kind of start naturally from that as well. and you get 10, 15 people in a room and you start walking around and asking, what are you interested in learning about? And then you hear a lot of people are interested in nodes, or they are interested in mining, or they want to learn how wallets work. And then workshops kind of come out of that. And that's one of the really cool things I've noticed at meetups is it doesn't really feel forced anywhere I've been. It's it's not that meetup organizers have these grand machinations for
Right.
what they're going to build, and they're trying to, get people somehow to come to their event with free food or whatever. It's very organic. So there's a lot of ambition among meetup organizers about what they'd like to do, but it's all happening at the right time when people are asking for it, coming around and saying, we want speakers, we want workshops on this and that. And it's very much a back and forth with the community.
Very organic is the word.
Yeah, organic.
There's no like top down Bitcoin organization that is building out these meetups.
Exactly. And it leads to a lot more ingenuity, I think,
Yeah.
too. There's like every meetup has some crazy idea for some new thing they want to do.
So let's so you started was it 30 meetups? Was that the total amount you've been to?
I think 31 with San
31.
Francisco that I was on the bike for.
And so you started in Florida? You
Yeah,
started in Texas. You started in Florida
started in Florida at the Bitcoin conference.
at Bitcoin 2022.
Yeah. And we actually did a mega meetup there. So I organized a meetup of everyone who goes to their local meetups. That's how I kind of build it. And I was hoping maybe I'd get 100 signups. I had an Eventbrite page. It was just a free event in the lobby of the convention center. And I got 996 signups.
Holy shit.
And about 150 people, probably maybe 200 people came through, which was incredible. I got to meet a lot of the meetup organizers there before I started
You
the
got to
trip.
coordinate it basically ahead of time and put a face to a name.
Exactly, yeah. And see who are the real meetup organizers who really are doing this for Bitcoin, who want me to come versus, I might see a Twitter page out there that says it's a Bitcoin meetup, but you start digging in and you're like, oh, it's a shitcoin meetup, or for whatever
Right, I mean,
reason,
and
it's
that
not
was
what you're
very
going to.
common for a long time. That was like
Yeah.
Bitcoin and name only.
Yeah.
One of the crazier things is not just Bitcoin meetups blowing up, but Bitcoin only meetups blowing up. They're not blockchain meetups. They're not crypto meetups. They're not talking about NFTs. This is a Bitcoin meetup.
Yeah, and they're very, very different in flavor and discussion.
I mean, before we move on, I realized I didn't highlight that point that you make, that attendance seems to be at least flatline, if not going up in a down market, is a pretty astounding fact. Because I mean, I remember, I used to be part of the New York Bitcoin community, and we had New York Bit Devs, which was the first Bit Devs. Super technical conversation, no photos, no videos allowed to be taken, no price talk allowed. So like the type of meetup that you would think is most immune to price, and even that meetup was like when the price would drop, the attendance would drop like 50% or whatever.
Yeah.
And then when price was pumping, we'd be like filled to the brim, and you couldn't.
Yeah.
There was no space.
Well, I think the macro environment is also changing really quickly. Over the last 2 years, the freedom, self-sovereignty, censorship-resistant aspect of Bitcoin has really been highlighted. Especially in America, we didn't have much of a reason for that before 2020, and now we see, just the country above us doing crazy things with people's bank accounts with, no reason. So
The country that must not be named.
yeah.
I like referring to them as the country above us. I'm gonna adopt that.
Go for
it. Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it, right? It's not just. I mean, we had Maulers here last month, and I said, like, as a CEO of one of the fastest growing Bitcoin companies, like, how do you handle building, being sustainable in a bear market? And he was like, Matt, this isn't a bear market. This is a fucking macro recession. Like, this is a completely different environment than like a traditional Bitcoin bear market.
Yeah.
So I feel like in a lot of ways, even if the price is down, people are like, well, this is my hope, right? This is like, this is what keeps me optimistic in this crazy world. Like, I'm even more focused on it now than I would be while it was pumping, maybe. Or
yeah, the price is down, but so is the price of everything else too.
Exactly.
Even if you look at it just purely from an investment perspective, if you were DCAing for a couple years, you're probably better off in Bitcoin than you would have been in any other asset.
So we have a comment from Weird Robot, who it was a pleasure to meet him last month. He was visiting Nashville. He says, any recommendations to do that sort of traveling without spending a shit ton of money?
Yeah.
I mean, you made money on this whole thing, right?
I broke even.
You broke you.
Minus the motorcycle.
Everybody's a scammer. Well, I mean, you bought the motorcycle, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
now you're selling the motorcycle.
But I'm selling the motorcycle at some point. So hopefully I will have made money in sats.
And you got sponsored by Swan in the magazine, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and Unchained and Upstream Data. They threw in a little bit of
everyone's a scammer.
money.
So and the cool thing is this bike, as you went along the meetups, like everyone signed it. Like my signature's on that bike.
Your signature's on there. I mean, there's probably like 300-400 signatures on both bags now.
Yeah, so I mean, there's probably a good argument that bike's worth more than when you bought it.
That's the dream.
Yeah.
That's the hope. Yeah, so
maybe just hold on to it for a little bit. Like the collector value probably go up a little bit.
Yeah, that's
especially if the Bitcoin price goes up.
I'm gonna hold the saddlebags for sure because those can just pop off of the bike too, so I can keep those. But I do actually have some thoughts on this.
That's what I signed. I signed the saddlebag.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You signed the saddlebags. I made sure everyone signed just the bags because the bags you can just take off.
Everyone's a scammer.
And then the bike is the bike. So. Yeah,
I should have signed both sides.
Well, somebody brought up to me I should auction the saddlebags separately and see which one gets more money, like which one has the more coveted signatures.
Ooh. Well, I imagine together they're worth more.
Yeah.
Just from a collector's point of view. So anyway, let's answer this guy's question.
Yeah. So traveling without spending a shit ton of money. The biggest thing that I saved money on this trip, which was totally unforeseen, and I would have lost money if it weren't for this, was just the hospitality of Bitcoiners. We talk a lot about privacy and security and don't trust, verify, but a lot of Bitcoiners open their homes to me, having never met me, and let me stay with their families, sleep in their guest bedroom.
Fucking insane.
Which was not something I expected at all, but definitely helped because especially with inflation this year, if I had to pay for hotels, my trip cost would have been like 50% more than what it was. Would have been insane. So that helped a lot. And I think it was kind of a reputation thing at the beginning of the trip. It was a little bit harder. And then as I went on the trip and more people heard about it and more people heard, I stayed with this Bitcoin.
It was like a web of trust. It was like, everyone's like, oh, he's a good dude. And if it's like someone that you respected says that, then.
Exactly. Yeah. And, as long as I don't break that reputation, then I can get a lot of benefit out of it. So I would say just reach out to Bitcoiners. They're more hospitable than you might think, especially if you're really into the privacy side. As I was, I used to work at Kraken, and they just drilled it into you.
That I didn't know that.
If you ever talk about Bitcoin, you're going to get stabbed in the back, and they're going to take your.
Jesse takes it super seriously.
Yeah, I mean the whole company, the entire grain of the company. It's a cybersecurity company. They're very intense about security. So I used to be so paranoid about talking about Bitcoin, but that's not my personality at all. I want to talk about it. I want to have in-person interactions about Bitcoin. So when I started this trip, I was kind of still in that mind that most Bitcoiners are not going to want to. They're going to build a wall, and they're not going to let me into their homes or meet their families or real names or any of that. And I found that it was totally different. Once they trust you, it's like you're good until you break that trust.
Yeah, I mean, there's this amazing part about being active in the Bitcoin community that you almost feel like you have family in every city in the world.
Yeah, I do. I definitely do now.
Super powerful. It's like amazing. I was saying, we were just in Norway or whatever. We met a bunch of awesome Norwegian Bitcoiners. And I was like, if I got stuck in this country, like there'd be a ton of beds that I could crash on or couches or whatever. Just because we have family everywhere. It's super powerful.
Yeah.
And the other thing you did to save money that was really cool was cooking steaks on the road.
People love this. So it was at the Beef Initiative.
Badass.
Yeah. Every single podcast, every single conversation I have about this tour, people are like, tell me about cooking the steak. So I went to the Beef Initiative conference, the first one in Kerrville, Texas. And while I was there, I was talking to Slim about like eating beef on the road and how he eats healthy on the road if you're trying to avoid all this processed food, but processed food is everywhere. And he said, well, I bring like a cast iron skillet and a little hot plate and I'll cook in my hotel room. So I was thinking, well, I could buy that kit and kind of store it on my motorcycle. I didn't have much space, but I could maybe fit it on there. And then I was talking to the chef at the Beef Initiative about cooking on the road. And he said, man, you got an engine, you can cook on it. It generates heat. Just get like, wrap something in foil and strap it to the exhaust pipe, and it'll cook over a couple hours. And he told me to look up manifold cooking. And sure enough, it's not just a one-off thing people do. It's a whole like type of cuisine. There's cookbooks on manifold cooking. It's kind of like Dutch oven cooking where you don't really know what temperature you're cooking
Right.
at, low and slow, and it's
It's
kind of
like
a crapshoot.
it's a metal box, right? That
Mhm.
you slap a steak in there, you attach it.
Yeah.
What piece are you attaching it to?
The one I got is called a muff pot.
So you're attaching it to, like, the muffler, right?
You attach it to the exhaust pipe right where it comes out of the cylinder,
So it's
so
super
it's
hot,
super hot.
and then you're, like, just driving on the road, and 3 hours later, your steak is cooked or something
Yeah,
like that.
exactly. When I arrived in Nashville on the tour, I had a perfectly cooked pink steak all the way through.
That's a nice hack, especially I mean, if you're biking, that's a great hack.
Yeah, if you've got a just any engine, I mean, other than a Tesla, if you've got any engine that
You can
creates
attach it
heat,
to your car or whatever.
it's even easier on a car because the way car engines are usually set up, like say you have a four-cylinder or a six-cylinder, the exhaust manifold usually comes out kind of flat out of the side, and it's just like a grill. So you can wrap potatoes in foil and steaks and just throw them on there. You don't need a box or anything. You just need foil.
Well, that's awesome. Well, that's a good life hack. There you go, freaks. That'll save you some money.
Yeah.
Um, so where were we? Oh, so we started you started in Florida, and then where'd you go from there?
So from Florida, I blasted all the way to Texas
Right.
in 5 days from Miami to Dallas. Wouldn't do it again, but it was a good trial by fire.
There was
And
something you needed to get there for, right? There was a
Yeah. So I knew when I was planning this that it would be kind of difficult to reschedule meetups, especially really big meetups. And the Houston and Austin meetups were just perfectly timed, like 2 weeks after uh, Bitcoin 2022 and 1 week after each other. So I went to Austin Bit Devs and then the big Houston meetup. So I went to Dallas first and then Austin, then Houston, spent about a week in each, then back to Dallas for a BitBlock barbecue. And then I headed east again, back across Tennessee and North Carolina.
and that's when I saw you.
Yeah.
And then after that, where'd you go from there?
So through North Carolina, went to Asheville, Charlotte, Raleigh, and then up north to Ohio through Virginia, West Virginia, and then did the Midwest.
That's such an awesome path.
Yeah, it was really nice. I totally avoided the East Coast. Weirdly enough, I didn't see any Bitcoin meetups on the East Coast other than New York. There's New York Pit Devs and there's a Harlem meetup. But
Yeah, there's a
other than
new
that,
Harlem one.
yeah, and there's a Philly meetup actually too in Philadelphia and some people in DC. But I just thought, you know what? It's a really long slog to get up there for a few meetups. So I just headed through the
Fair
Midwest
enough.
instead.
Um, yeah, I mean, I've seen some new meetups pop up there. There's to freaks who are looking for like a meetup in their area. Um, I have a Twitter list. If you go to my Twitter account and go to lists, I have a Twitter list called Grassroots Bitcoin that I've just been adding meetup accounts as I find them. And if there's not a meetup in your area, consider starting one. As we said earlier, it's as easy as putting up a meetup page, sending out a tweet, and meeting at a bar somewhere with a couple Bitcoiners and starting from there. Um, and I usually will. Um, People who have done this before know that I hate when someone sends me a tweet to retweet in DMs. Like usually, if it's a tweet that I was going to retweet anyway, I will intentionally not retweet it because you sent it to me in DMs and it pisses me off. But if you're starting a meetup, that's excluded. So if you send if you send me a tweet because you're starting a meetup, I will happily give you more exposure on that. Um, we actually I met a ride or die freak in Texas who was from Boston, and elder individual. And that's what he did. He was like, I don't have any Bitcoin only meetups in like the greater Boston area or the outside of Boston. He's like in the suburbs or something. And he was like, "What should I do?" And I was like, "Just start a meetup." He's like, "I'm gonna do it." And he started it, and it seems like he's getting some traction, which is really fucking cool.
Awesome.
Um, do you have any bad experiences with the meetups?
At meetups, no, not at all, which was also another surprising thing. I thought I would accidentally go to a shitcoin meetup or meet more, degenerate gambler types, but
Yeah.
I was shocked. I rarely ran into anyone who wasn't a ride or die Bitcoiner that was really into it. And I think we talk a lot, well, recently about the whole maximalism thing and, what is a
Toxicity.
Bitcoiner and toxicity and all that. And I found that at meetups, and probably because it's in person, that the negativity of that world just disappears. People are much more positive. They're focused on building a future that's better for them and their communities. And you lose a lot of that. People just ignore the shit coins. It's not like
Do you think
you get on Twitter.
do you think it's a Bitcoin specific thing, or do you think like Twitter is just set up in a way that it brings out like the worst in people?
Yeah, I think it's because Twitter brings out the worst in people,
Yeah.
honestly. I don't think people are really like that usually. I mean, I wrote a little bit about doom versus doing. On Twitter, there's so much dooming. There's so
Yeah.
much because that's what it feeds and engenders. That's
It's
what
the
you get.
extremes on both sides. It's like the
Yeah,
doom and then like the bullshit hopium.
yeah, or the puppy videos or
They get like
whatever.
the most that gets the most engagement.
Yeah, yeah, so it pulls those types of things out. And in person, the extremes don't work very well, or at least the negative extremes.
Right.
People don't wanna hang out with you if you're just always depressing like that. So it's just a much more
No one wants to have a
warm
3-hour
environment.
conversation over beers talking about like just dooming all day
Yeah, exactly. It's
or
not
like shitting on
not a good way to
people.
live your life. So
Yeah.
meetups are much more focused on what can we do here and now in our community to push this forward.
Yeah, I mean, I experienced that firsthand because the other day we had like 200 people at the park and we were having like a great time or whatever. And I like didn't look at Twitter all day. And then I opened Twitter and there was like all this bullshit drama of like people fighting back and forth and arguing about all this shit. And I was just like, well, I guess I'm winning. I'm just going to sign off again.
Exactly. I feel like meetup organizers and people that go to these meetups, they're the true winners in Bitcoin because uh, they're getting to move forward on Bitcoin and make progress without all of that toxicity and back and forth and negativity. I'll say, are we still running? Yeah, I'll say a few things about starting a meetup as well, because as I went to different meetups, I started to get an idea of what the whole space looks like. And I think a lot of people who are thinking about starting a meetup, it sounds kind of um, difficult because you have to get everyone together and get a venue and all
Sounds
these things.
overwhelming.
Sounds overwhelming. Exactly. That's the word I'm looking for. It sounds overwhelming. You can start a meetup by just going to a bar with a few Bitcoiners. So that alone is fine. Now, I understand getting from that to a bigger meetup can also seem overwhelming, but there's a lot of coordination that's happening between meetups that I'm seeing. So, like, for example, in the Midwest, there's a Midwest Bitcoiners group, and it's mostly people who go to their local meetups. So, it's people from Minneapolis all the way to Ohio and everywhere in between. And they're all talking about Bitcoin and about their different meetups and sharing ideas. So, if you're starting a meetup, it's good to get integrated into those regional spaces because they're going to have more time and attention for their own region. It's harder if you just go out on Twitter and you try to advertise your meetup because you're advertising it to everyone all over the world. But
Right.
in those smaller groups, you're
But
talking to
really
people in your
someone in like
area.
India doesn't really like they don't need to know you're running a
Exactly.
Asheville meetup
Like
or something.
maybe they might be in Lexington, Kentucky
Right.
at some point in their life, but it's probably not going to happen. But if you're in Lexington connecting with Southern Bitcoiners, then you might have people from Nashville that'll come up for your meetup.
Yeah, I mean we see that a lot here as we've been building out the Nashville meetup. So this meetup that we had on Wednesday was officially the 1 year anniversary.
Wow.
At
Congratulations.
1 year of Nash Bitcoiners. And I wasn't here for the first one. So the first one was in August of last year. Um, and I started coming down in September. I came for the second one. I missed October, and then I've been to everyone since then. And so the August one was 35 people in the rain at a brewery outside. And now it's averaging over 200 people within a year. And one of the cool things that we've seen happen is there's a lot of people that come from cities within like a 6-hour radius, including meetup organizers. So they come from 6-hour radius. They didn't have a meetup in their area, or maybe it was a small meetup. And then they go back home and then they create a meetup in their local town. So like we had the Knoxville Bitcoin meetup pop up. We had the Huntsville Bitcoin meetup pop up. Asheville Bitcoiners popped up. And then they all come here, and then we all kind of coordinate together or talk and share experiences and help boost each other. Um, and like the whole region is kind of growing organically, but together, like everyone
Mhm.
empowers each other, right?
Exactly. I think it's about empowerment and helping people
Yeah.
get through different issues that they're having or give them ideas for things that they could run or ways that they can grow their meetup.
And we're gonna actually, if you're a meetup organizer and I haven't reached out to you already, reach out to me. We are doing we're doing like a summit for meetup organizers in September here in Nashville, which I'm pretty excited about. Which we're also calling Grassroots Bitcoin. Um,
That's going to be awesome.
but yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. I think that's a really good recommendation. Just to, like, if you're starting a meetup, consider going to meetups like within a 4 or 5 hour range. If you jump in the car, grab a friend or something, go to an
Yeah.
established meetup that's somewhere in the region.
One other thing I'll say is uh, even if there's a meetup in your city, you can start another one.
100%.
And I've seen this in a couple places. Like I went to a small one in Houston where they have a very large meetup that's focused on the energy sector. And this small meetup is more, it's at a co-working space, it's around a big table, it's more conversational. It just attracts a different crowd, people who don't thrive in these big meet and greet type of scenarios, and they want to have a smaller, deeper discussion with more technical people or, what have you. So they've started another meetup, it's thriving. They're talking to other meetup organizers, but you can do your own thing if you want to. I think the Bay Area also does this well because it's so spread out.
The Bay Area does it really
Oh man.
interesting, right? Because there's
Yeah,
like an affiliation of a bunch of little meetups under Bay Area Bitcoiners.
exactly. Which makes so much sense for a large metro area. Like maybe Nashville, not so much because it's pretty easy to get to downtown Nashville. But like Dallas, Fort Worth should be doing this because if you live in Fort Worth, to come to downtown Dallas can be an hour both
Right.
ways. And same with the Bay Area. To come to San Francisco, if you live in the North Bay, it can be easily an hour and a half drive both ways.
Yeah, it's really interesting what the Bay Area Bitcoiners did. I would say that I do not expect it to be replicated on, I mean, they did it in a very, it's like very cohesive and professional.
Hmm.
They're like affiliation thing that's going on over there. But I do see all the time, um, and this is something we talk about in Bitcoin in general, not just meetups. Just more options, the better, right? And I mean,
Yep.
I saw when I used to live in New York, like we had BitDevs, which was like our highly technical, 200-person meetup that happened once a month. But then it was like a bunch of Bitcoiners started another meetup that was just like a weekly, let's get drunk. Let's just meet up at the bar after work and drink and talk Bitcoin. And they all fill different purposes, and it makes the whole thing um, more robust and more distributed, right? If you have more options in different areas,
Yep.
you don't want like one person or a group of people controlling uh, maybe Bitcoin conversations in a city,
Yep.
right?
It attracts different types of people. It engenders different conversations, all these different formats. So yeah, the more meetups, the better.
Do you so I asked you if you had any bad experiences. Did you have any particularly positive experiences? Was there anything that caught you, like when you think back? Like,
Yeah, I will. I mean, every meetup was a positive
yeah.
experience, but I'll name one city in particular that was incredibly hospitable, which was Milwaukee. So I was super excited to go to Milwaukee because it's the home of Harley Davidson as well.
Right.
So I went on the way from Chicago to Minneapolis. I stopped in Milwaukee for 2 nights, and the first night, there was nowhere for me to stay with the meetup organizers. One of the meetup organizers offered a long time ago to put me up, and then when I got the exact dates down, he was like, "Well, we're both out of town, so we have nowhere to put you up." And so they put me up at the Iron Horse Hotel, which is a Harley-themed hotel, like, across the bridge from Harley's original factory, which was
Awesome.
so sweet, paid for it and everything. They
Yeah.
took me out that night. Some people from the meetup met up with me and took me out, showed me Milwaukee. I learned so much about that city and what they're trying to do there, and they were just incredibly hospitable the whole time I was there. It was amazing.
Wow. Shout out Milwaukee Bitcoiners.
Yeah, great meetup.
You got the Captain Sid massive endorsement over here. So what else do you want to talk about?
Let's see.
I don't have anywhere to go right now, but I'm enjoying this conversation.
So one thing I came upon a lot while I was on the road is just how to talk to normal people about Bitcoin,
Okay.
you know? And I found for one that
Probably shouldn't call them normal people right before you do it. Continue.
I mean, you call your listeners freaks, right?
Yeah.
So how do you
Hello,
talk
normal
to
person. Have you heard of
non-freaks?
Bitcoin?
Yeah. That's usually how I open the conversation, and that's maybe why it didn't go so well. But so I would usually open with the motorcycle trip because I found if I just start talking about Bitcoin, people shut down. They don't want to hear about it.
Right.
And I kind of figured that out after 2017 and it started to crash. If you talk about Bitcoin, people are like, shut up about your Ponzi scam.
Right.
So when I started with a motorcycle trip, it kind of disarmed people, and then they became more interested in, they're interested in the
Who
trip.
doesn't like a cross-country motorcycle trip?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everyone is interested in that topic. So
Yeah.
then when I combine it with Bitcoin, then they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe there's something more to this that I'm missing. So I would talk about the local community, and people had the same common misconceptions of like, well, who organizes all the meetups? And I had to try to explain to them, nobody from the top is organizing these. It's individuals who want to meet up and talk about this open source protocol. And I had
We
some
have
really
Gary K in the comments, by the way, saying that they prefer to be called normies.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I should use that label next time. Hey, Normie, let me talk to you about Bitcoin. So I kind of made that a theme of the tour. Like, don't talk about Bitcoin until someone really starts asking you about it, and try to understand who they are. And I also got that from meeting Texas Slim from the
I
Beef
was going to
Initiative.
say that you sound like Slim right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's
Slim's like, I don't talk to ranchers about Bitcoin. I just talk to them about life. Bitcoin
exactly,
comes up
he
eventually.
nails it. He's like, just talk to people about their lives and what they're concerned about, and then try to relate that to Bitcoin. But don't just push Bitcoin on people because they don't want to hear it. They think it's a scam. And then it feels more like a multi-level marketing. You're just trying to rope them in because you're not interested in them. You just want to sell what you want to sell. So I found that to be a much better style for just opening conversations about what I was doing and what Bitcoin is and why it matters so much to me.
I mean, I guess your bike also said Bitcoin on it, like all over the place, right?
Not really. I mean, it had the Swan Bitcoin logo
And the
on it
Bitcoin magazine logo on it, right?
and the Bitcoin Magazine logo, but yeah, Bitcoin Magazine, that logo said Bitcoin pretty big.
Yeah.
But if you're just looking at the bike, you wouldn't immediately
Right.
see that it was about Bitcoin.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I went in with preconceived notions. I'm trying to think of when I first saw the bike. I was like, oh, it's a Bitcoin bike.
Well, when you see the orange saddlebags in the
Yeah.
Bitcoin orange and you're a Bitcoiner,
What do you think about
recognize
Bitcoin
it.
Orange? Was that a mistake?
Oh, I love it. I
People are very I think it's a love-hate thing. It's like you
really,
either love it or hate it.
I have not encountered well, I haven't really encountered opinions about it. It's just there. It's kind of like 21 million. Like,
We like to talk about the
it's just
hard
there.
topics on Dispatch.
Yeah, I like it because it's bright.
It's
It's in your
really
face.
bright. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a very aggressive color.
It's like the rising sun.
Right.
It's a new dawn. It's a new dawn that we're bringing
So
with
so
Bitcoin.
when Bitcoin does how do you, if you were going to pitch Bitcoin to someone after, so I guess naturally, like, you're having that conversation, right? And then Bitcoin eventually comes up. What do you what's your quick pitch on Bitcoin?
So I heard a really good one that I'm just gonna shamelessly rip from someone in,
Those are the
Charlotte.
best ones. Yeah.
Yeah, so someone in Charlotte, this was, early this year, so inflation was really popping off, and they said it was something like, you ask somebody, you say the Fed has printed 40% of all the money in circulation, of all the dollars in circulation in the last year. Did your bank account go up by 40%? Did your 401k go up by 40%? Your stock portfolio, your house, all these different assets. Maybe one of them did. Maybe you live in a really nice neighborhood and your house price went up 40%, but everything across the board did not go up 40%. So where did that value go? Someone else took it from you. That's what money printing is, and that's what Bitcoin fights. When you buy Bitcoin, they can't do that to you. And I thought that was a really clear, everyone understands that, from
That's
the
interesting.
bartender to the investor, because everyone, looks at their income, their assets, and they see, oh, that didn't go up. And you can look at a chart that verifiably says the dollar to some extent went up 40%
Right.
in supply.
That's
So somebody
interesting.
else has those
That's
extra
no
dollars.
that's a tactic I very rarely go down the inflation. But I guess it's, like, hot right now, right?
Yeah, it's
It's like a
topical
it's
too.
a mainstream topic all of a sudden.
And I think that that is like, fortunately or unfortunately, part of the game. If you want people to become interested in Bitcoin, you have to hit on something that's topical or something that really matters to them, or they're not going to care. Because if you hit on what matters to you, they might not care about it. And
So usually when um if I am tasked with talking to someone who's kind of Bitcoin curious, um, I try not to I'm past the point in my Bitcoin life where I try and convince someone they need Bitcoin. So I only really talk about Bitcoin with people that already recognize they're curious about it. They recognize that there is some kind of need for better money.
yeah.
But usually what I line into is um, that it's just ridiculous, this idea that you need to either be um, a financial guru or hire someone that is to manage like this diversified portfolio to protect your wealth and all that bullshit that entails. And that at its core, like Bitcoin is immensely simple,
Hmm.
right? Like I feel like we get dragged down into, I mean, obviously I've spent hours, days, years going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and there's a million different things. Um, there are different directions you can go down, and no one ever learns everything there is about Bitcoin. But to me, the promise of Bitcoin is uh, that it's extremely simple, and that you're able to just live your life and do whatever you're passionate about, and then at the end of the day, save and better money, spend and better money, and you just don't even have to think about it. You just stack, and if everything goes as we expect it to go, it should increase in purchasing power over time, and you don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that resonates with people because there's just such a mental burden. Like our day-to-day lives are just filled with so much bullshit that if you can cut out that one aspect, all of a sudden you're freeing yourself up to actually live your life to the fullest.
Yeah. I met a lot of people on this trip that don't even understand that you need a financial advisor to make it, though.
Right.
Either because they're, and this is all over crypto, they think, well, you just have to buy a lotto ticket. They don't understand that
Right.
anything has ever been different, or they just don't understand like the impact of inflation. I met a surprising amount of people that are they just deal with dollars. Like a Harley sales guy, I asked him, he said, I'm a traditional guy. My son, watches YouTube about Bitcoin a lot, but I don't really understand it. I just deal with cash. And then later I asked him,
Like it
so
just holds cash.
yeah, I was like, well, what you have a family, like what assets do you have? Do you buy stocks or whatever? And he said, no, I told you I just have cash. He
Huh.
literally has cash in a mattress and in the bank. That's it. And
That's a losing
faced
strategy.
with inflation, he just doesn't know what to do. So And I think
That's
he's an
interesting.
older guy. I think he just thought cash is king. You just have cash and then you're fine
Right,
because you can
inflation
spend it.
hasn't been horrible.
Inflation hasn't been terrible. This is
Yeah.
just how the world works. They don't think about
But it's that
your
same thing. He doesn't want the mental burden. He doesn't even wanna consider it, right?
yeah, I guess that's true. But he doesn't even consider it.
I guess what I mean, especially with the younger people, it's, like, so normalized now that they have, like, a Robinhood account and they're, like, picking random stocks. Like, I was, like, chilling with a buddy from high school, and he's, like, showing me his, like, Robinhood portfolio, and he's got, like, random, like, Chinese electric car manufacturers and stuff. I was like, how'd you pick this one?" And he's like, "Oh, well, Reddit said, like, I should just, like, buy it or whatever." And he's aware that like, inflation's an issue and that he needs to do all this shit. And I'm like, "I already told you about Bitcoin. You already own Bitcoin. Just fucking stay humble and stack sats and don't
Yeah.
fucking deal with this shit."
It's a fiat mentality, I think. You think that gambling is the only way out because you're sitting on a melting ice cube, and even investing
The
in
melting ice cube's a
S&P
good meme.
500. Yeah, I mean, even a stock is a melting ice cube. If you really wanna grow your wealth, you gotta get out there and gamble, and that's sort of what you're billed in my generation.
Right, I mean, the whole like, the fiat economists, that's what they say, is, like, inflation is necessary because it, like, basically forces you not to save.
Yeah,
You either have
forces
to
you to
invest or
invest.
spend.
Yeah, and invest in riskier and riskier stuff to get the same return.
Well, the comments are popping off right now.
Normalist.
Yeah, I
That's a
mean,
good
that's
term.
interesting. It's a know your audience kinda thing, right? Like, it's not a one size fits all. Bitcoin is different things to different people, and it'll
Exactly.
click for I remember when I it's interesting, like, how, like, as you go down your Bitcoin journey, Bitcoin changes for yourself too. When I first got into Bitcoin, I was looking at it and, um, like, I like to gamble, with, like, poker and sports betting and stuff like that, and I looked at Bitcoin as simply a ideal way to deposit and withdraw from gambling websites. Like, that's
Mhm,
what clicked for me. I was like, because the US government used Visa and MasterCard and all the traditional payment rails to block deposits and withdrawals from online gambling sites. And I was like, well, if Bitcoin is just used by American gamblers, just used by American, it should be pretty successful. And, like, that was my entry into the rabbit hole. And obviously now, like, Bitcoin is so much more than that to me.
mhm.
That's just a tiny little use case of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that's how people get on board it, honestly, is they
Yeah.
find something that solves a real need for them immediately.
Right.
They start using it, they get a little more comfortable with it. Now they're disarmed to reading an article about it because they don't think it's just some Ponzi scheme. They're like, wow, this actually solves a real need in my life.
Right.
Then they start learning more and more about it. And eventually they end up as far down the rabbit hole as you or I are,
Right.
but it starts with just something that hits on a real need for
It
them.
clicks. Yeah.
Clicks. Yeah.
We talk about that a lot that, like, um, I think everyone will eventually come to the conclusion and realize the need for better money. Um, I don't really think I don't really think we need to convince people of the need, because they will I don't think outward facing Bitcoin marketing is really that necessary, to convince pre-coiners to become coiners. Um, I think what's more necessary is that when they realize the need, we have the tools and education ready for them, to make that as easy a process, accessible a process as
Yeah.
possible, is kind of the framing I've been looking at lately.
Yeah, that's kinda how I think about it too, like, the door is there, you can open it, but they have to walk through it.
Right.
You just make it easy to do that, that's what we can do. Like, I wrote a whole website about economics and finance
Really?
with that in mind, yeah, it's called whatismoney.info, and basically what I wanted to do is rebuild, like, Investopedia and The Balance to address economics questions like, what is inflation, or how does fractional reserve banking work? And answer it in a truthful way that actually exposes that, oh, our monetary system is complete BS and
Oh, wow, you
built
got a
on, like
lot of stuff on here.
yeah, there's like 30 something articles that I wrote.
Damn.
And the idea is that people will come to it through Google by asking questions. So they'll Google things like Cantillon effect because they hear it somewhere, and then they'll end up on my site reading about what that is. And I've never really mentioned Bitcoin until the very end of an article. And then I'll start talking about solutions. And what if we had, a monetary system that at the base layer solved for this inflation that causes all these other problems? If that existed, that would be a great solution to that. Oh, by the way, there's this thing called Bitcoin that is exactly that.
That's interesting. I love how Bitcoiners have, like, all these different so did you do all these different projects? Did you do this before or after the ride?
This was before I wrote all this in 2020.
I love it.
Yeah, and put up some YouTube videos too that kind of mirror the articles.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, it's been fun to do. It's an insanely rewarding experience to write all that content and then just watch people find it. Watch the Google search console. You can see people finding articles and watch articles blow up and people find it interesting and useful. It's really cool.
Let's talk about win some hacks. Just don't run up to someone looking all sweaty and fervent and say, "Have you heard of our Lord and Savior Bitcoin?" We touched on the beef initiative. It's something that I've been um, diving into pretty hard. I was just at the Colorado one. What are your thoughts there? I mean, it's to me, it's crazy because it's like all these different elements of empowering yourself as an individual all kind of coming together, and Bitcoin is just a small portion of that, right? Like at the
Mhm.
Colorado thing, my understanding was that was a bigger Bitcoin portion than usual, and it was like, maybe 10% of the content or 15% of the content.
Yeah, I love what they're doing with the Beef Initiative in that they're bringing these parallel communities who kind of
Exactly.
understand the ethos behind Bitcoin, but ranchers are a great example of probably the last people who would ever really seriously read about or get curious about Bitcoin because they're not technical people. They're out in the field working with their hands. They're not the finance tech people that gravitate to and get interested in something like Bitcoin. And they're, to my understanding, scammed a lot by technologies and, newfangled things that people say you need this for your farm or your ranch. So they do not want anything to do with Bitcoin. The Beef Initiative bridges that and shows them that actually 90% of your values line up perfectly with how Bitcoin operates. So you should understand what this is. But Slim has done it really well in that you also need to know that Bitcoiners understand you. Before we just start pitching, we want you to know that we're interested in beef, we're interested in food, we're interested in getting to the root to, as Slim says, the seed of the soil of the seed or something like that, like all the way down to the seed and the soil.
It's got a bunch of sayings.
Yeah, he's got all these catchphrases. Like where does what you're eating come from?
Shake your rancher's hand.
Exactly. And shake your hand. I mean, that lines up perfectly with Bitcoin meetups. Like shake a Bitcoiner's hand.
Yeah,
Go meet
shake a local Bitcoiner's hand.
exactly. Go meet real Bitcoiners in person.
That's an interesting perspective that you had, because I actually a little bit thought the opposite. So I've done a lot of work with activists, um, and activists is very fulfilling work because, first of all, I mean, you do not have to explain why Bitcoin is needed. I mean, they have a massive need for censorship-resistant money that can be transferred around the world
Mhm.
across borders and not be stopped by like the authoritarians that they're fighting against. Um, They just want to be told, what tools are available to them and how they can use those tools. And with ranchers, it felt very similar to me. Like I taught, I did a Bitcoin 101 in Colorado at Jason Reich's ranch, small family ranch, like 300 acres. He stewards like the surrounding 4,000 acres. It's just a humble 300-acre ranch.
Yeah, I visited on
Um,
my trip. It's pretty
and
epic.
he's awesome. But the ranchers were really perceptive. Like they were really interested, and they had, I mean, generations of just getting stamped down and hurt in every possible
Mhm.
fucking way. Like Econo Alchemist did a So it mostly wasn't Bitcoin. It was ranching, it was sustainable farming practices, regenerative agriculture, raising children, home births, homeschooling. But Eco did one presentation. I did a mining panel, and then I did a Bitcoin 101. And Eco obviously joined for the mining panel too. Uh, Eco gets up there and he's like, "I'm not a rancher. I'm surrounded by ranchers." So I was like, "How am I supposed to do this presentation?" And he's like, "Well, one thing we can agree on is that the state hates us." He was just like, "This is how the state has I don't have to tell you guys how the state has trampled on ranching or whatever. This Bitcoin is this tool that can empower you and give you personal responsibility back, get back that individual power." And ranchers are the type of people that like, everything comes down to them, like, they know
Mhm.
personal responsibility, like, one of the hardest issues with Bitcoin in the developed world, um, is that just people have been groomed to not have personal responsibility in any aspect of their life. They
Yep.
like, "Oh, there's always excuses, we're a heavily litigious society, there's always someone else you can sue, someone else's fault it is, someone holding your hand, some regulation telling you can't do something, so you don't do it." Um but with ranchers and with activists, that's not the case. They live lives of radical personal responsibility
Mhm.
already. So that is, to me, has always been one of the biggest hurdles, and that hurdle just does not exist on the ranching side.
Yeah. That's what I love about that community, and there's so many other communities I think out there that really get personal responsibility, proof of work, like, they're aligned to the ethos of how Bitcoin operates, or I don't know how to put that, but how Bitcoin operates in kind of reinforces a certain ethos. It requires personal responsibility, it runs on proof of work, and ranchers get that innately. Their entire life is proof of work. You can't grow a cow without
Exactly.
going out there every day and putting in the work. You can't
You should have
bullshit
seen
through
their
that.
eyes light up during the mining conversation.
Yeah, I bet that was super
Like
interesting.
like, it made so much sense to them.
Yeah, because they get that foundation, but it's then my point about them not touching Bitcoin before something like this is it seems so foreign when you're not talking to someone who really understands it. Because when you hear about it everywhere else, you hear about it usually in the context of casinos and high tech and finance stuff. And that's just far out, something that they don't really want to deal with for the most part. But when you connect it back to what they do care about and their values, then they get it immediately.
Right. Yeah, you have to know, I mean, you have to know your audience. I also
Mhm.
don't think, like, I think Bitcoin is falsely perceived, right, as being like a fintech innovation or something for
Yeah.
finance bros. Um, like I've had so many people say that to me, like, "Oh, I'm not interested in Bitcoin because I'm not a finance person."
Mhm.
It's like, no, that's why you should be interested in Bitcoin.
Yeah. That's who it's for.
Yeah. So I have an interesting. So I had this issue myself because I was like a very privacy focused Bitcoiner in the beginning. Um, and I was like very concerned about going to meetups when I was first getting into Bitcoin because I didn't know if I was gonna get scammed or robbed or, uh, targeted as a Bitcoiner. Sounds like you were, like, kinda the same way. Like, what advice do you have for people that, maybe they're a nim on Twitter, maybe they've never really had a face-to-face conversation about Bitcoin, that is, um, anxious about going to a local meetup?
I would say just start small. Start with the meetup organizer, maybe try to have coffee with someone, like broach the in-person thing in a way that you feel comfortable with and steps that you feel comfortable with, and then go more and more out there as you get more and more comfortable going to meetups, meeting people, being a public face. I used a NIM on this trip, and that's just sort of the line between privacy and convenience. Like, I
Right.
don't wanna be so
There's a
private that
trade-off balance
it's
there.
a trade-off, yeah, and we talked about that at the meetup yesterday here in Nashville. It's all a trade-off, so when you think about privacy, it's very easy to go down the rabbit hole and be like, "I need the cleaned up phone and the tails on my computer."
Right, the full extreme side.
Yeah, but it's so hard to really live life like that for most people, and for most people, it's not enjoyable to live life like that, so you have to figure out where's your balance there, and to get more comfortable revealing selectively parts of
Right.
your
It's not
identity
all
and
or
your
nothing.
face. It's not all or nothing, exactly.
I think that's a mistake a lot of people make too, is that they think, uh and you see people, like, overexpose themselves because they're like, "Oh, well, this stuff is already out there, so I might as well
Yeah,
go
just
even
bear it all.
more," right? But really, like, every little thing you do is there's this trade-off
Mhm.
here, and you can balance it to a degree, and I mean, I ultimately, I mean, I've met so many lifelong friends, people that I consider family that I've only met because I was willing to step out of that box.
Same.
Um,
Yeah. I went to a really interesting meetup in, Costa Mesa, California, that's run by a guy who goes by Hetty Wook on Twitter.
oh, yeah, I
Don't
love
know
that
his real
dude.
name, nobody knows it, and I interviewed him, and he wore a mask during the interview, but at the meetup, he just said, "No pictures of people." You can take pictures. I had the bike there and stuff. People were taking pictures of themselves or whatever, but do not take pictures of the group. And he talked a lot about Bisq and different privacy tools and mixers and things, and that's kind of the focus of that meetup because he's super into
That's
privacy,
awesome.
but he's also a meetup organizer, and he's shows his face, but I think the calculus for him is like, look, people are not gonna come out to this meetup to try and in-person scam just me because there's
Right.
so many easier ways to scam than to
It's a balancing act.
yeah,
I
it's a
I
balancing
I
act.
really like the, um, basically no photos or videos of people without their consent
Mhm.
as a meetup rule. It's something that Jay from New York Bit Devs, also a NIM, uh, doesn't put his face out there or whatever, says no photos, no videos. It's something that he was very strong about, to the point where, like, if someone new came to the meetup and they, like, pulled out their phone to take a picture, like, the whole meetup would just, like, stop and everyone would just turn and look at them. Like, the peer pressure was very, very strong. And we borrowed that, like, for Nash Bitcoiners, for the Nashville, things, and it's definitely a balancing act because photos get you a lot more exposure. So it's the easy option is to just have no photo restrictions. Um, but there's something really special in like this world that's like so, uh, we just like live in this digital panopticon now where like all of our lives and all of our conversations, like we saw that happen during COVID, where like all these conversations that were happening in bars and stuff started happening on Zoom and Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces, recorded forever, sometimes publicly broadcast as well. Um, and just to have these like in-person meeting spaces where essentially this conversation's happening and the only people that know the conversation happened or what the conversation was were the people that were there at the moment, just seems so real and so special
Mhm.
that I think people are sleeping on that as a line. Like, I'm not saying that everyone should do that. And there is a balancing act. Like, this guy's awesome that started Knoxville Bitcoiners after he came to Nashville Bitcoiners. And he's like, this is awesome. I got to start one in Knoxville. And he takes pictures. He'll post like one picture per meetup, and he'll just like black out everyone's faces.
Mhm.
And then he gets that exposure out of the picture, uh, but he doesn't actually dox anybody in the picture, and that's an interesting balance. We have Bitcoin in the comments saying phones are always listening, though. Well, I mean, I'm not against the idea of people putting like having like Faraday boxes or something. Everyone turns off their phone and puts it in the box. Or
That would be really cool if, like, the meetup organizer brought a little safe to the bar or whatever, and everyone put your phone in there, not just for the microphones, but for the quality of
yeah,
conversation.
so people aren't looking at their phone. Like I wanted, like we're gonna have a bunch of different events at the park. And one of the things I've been playing with is like when you go to like comedy shows nowadays, a lot of times they don't want you to record the conversations because otherwise their jokes get old. So they have these things that are like you just wear them around your neck, so you're holding onto your phone, but
Yeah.
it's in a sealed bag, so you can't access it unless you go to the staff and the staff unlocks it for you.
Yeah, I've seen that at,
Um,
like, sometimes at concert venues
yeah,
and
I think
stuff,
that'd
they'll
be
do
great
that.
for like small Bitcoin events.
Yeah.
because everyone would be present. You don't have to, and people would feel more comfortable that like, oh, like maybe this person is secretly recording me, that they're not doing that.
I wonder if we could talk to one of those companies and talk to them about, like, we'll give you a bunch of free press if you just give us a bunch of these bags,
Yeah.
for different, and we can hand them out at Grassroots Bitcoin, like, every meetup gets 10 bags or whatever.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna do that. I really like that idea.
Yeah.
Did you see, were there a lot of meetups that had a no photo policy, or was it rare?
Kinda half and half, maybe. Um, a good amount of the more established meetups had a no photo policy. I found that honestly, a lot of meetups, people were just too intent on talking to other Bitcoiners. They weren't really caring about photos. Like that wasn't why people came. So the no photo policy was implicit. It's just no one takes photos anyway, so it's not an official
Right.
policy.
I mean, it always, what really like bothers me is when people do like I'm at some like event or something and people do the like the pan shot,
Yeah.
where they like sit there and they just literally hit every single person in the room.
I just don't think Bitcoiners by and large are that kind of person that are clout farming on Instagram.
Yeah. I mean, I notice it just everywhere now.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed it in
That
other
is a
circles, but I
Like,
didn't
I was just
really see
at,
that.
like, the Music City Grand Prix or whatever, and, like, people are
Oh,
doing
yeah.
it all over. I was at the HRF's, Oslo Freedom Forum, and, like, people are doing it in, like, in the crowd or whatever, and I was like, "This is, like, completely out of touch, I do not."
Yeah, that's the last place I would expect that.
I'm, like, just sitting there with, like, my hat down, just, like, "Turn off your fucking camera."
Wow.
Um, yeah, I like the no photo policy is interesting. I think people should do that more. And there's a mix there too. So the other issue is like, okay, um, a lot of people I think agree on no photos of the crowd, no videos of the crowd, but then it's like, do you allow pictures and videos of like if you're having a panel like or a presentation of the panelists? And then it's like, okay, well, if there's this great content, like, why are we limiting it to just the local people? And I'm like pretty torn on that one. Um, Obviously, I have a podcast that is explicitly public, like it gets broadcast worldwide. Um, but there's something to be said about the conversations are different when you don't have a camera and mic pointed at you.
Mhm.
So a lot of the conversations, like, I wish we had captured at Nash Bitcoiners and posted online, might not have even happened if we were recording them in the first place, right?
Yeah, there's kind of a catch-22 there.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right expression, but yeah, there's certain things that when it's purposefully recorded, it just totally changes the nature of the conversation.
Yeah, and there's this other thing that, like, there's a reason why, so I've noticed that, with podcasting, there's been a big push towards video, um, and it's because just people like seeing faces.
Mhm.
They you just All the incentives are aligned up in a way that, like, people that have videos of them and their guests, just they do better on all these platforms. And what I've noticed is that, yeah, a lot of them, especially in the Bitcoin space, like if you go on as a NIM, they'll let you have your camera off. Um, but it's almost like those people are penalized
Yeah, in
in
terms of
that
engagement.
situation. So like with Dispatch, I've made it audio native. So like no one feels there's like this peer pressure almost where like a lot of people have, I think a lot of people, myself included in the beginning, like our faces became public because we felt almost like this unspoken peer pressure to do
Mhm.
it. You didn't want to be the only panelist or whatever, or the only person that had
It's wearing a mask or
that's
whatever.
wearing a mask. Yeah, and as soon as you wear a mask, you look like a fucking terrorist too.
Yeah, exactly. What
So
are you
it's
hiding
like
with your face front?
inherently like criminalizes you,
Mhm.
or at least like the perception. And I would just say, like, 2 items on that topic is that, first of all, if you're someone that's anxious about it, first of all, speak up. You don't have to do it. You can not expose your face. A lot of people don't. But then second of all, like to people that are running shows and people that are running meetups, um, to be aware of this, like to make sure that people are like actually comfortable with going through with it and they're not just kind of getting pressured into it and don't want to speak up.
Yeah. Yeah, always ask. Assume
Yeah.
that people don't wanna put their face out there.
I think that's a pretty safe assumption.
I like, Bitcoin's comment that avatars could help. Be pretty
Yeah.
cool, like, you can do those Zoom backgrounds, and on Instagram and stuff, you can do, like, face
Right.
filters to have that kinda thing. I mean, it's not perfect, obviously, but because 'cause you're not controlling it, it's
Yeah.
digitally done, so you don't know exactly what's happening behind the scenes, but that would be pretty cool 'cause a lot of it, I think, with faces is you can see emotions,
Yeah. People want to
you
see like
can
the
read
facial
more.
expressions.
Yeah, it just makes it more live and
I mean,
interesting.
there's a reason why like we like have face to face conversations, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Because like
exactly.
trying to
Brings it
emulate that.
a little closer to that.
Yeah, no, avatars kind of make sense to me. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that adds an element. I mean, I kind of so like my tactic with dispatch obviously is that like I have the live chat and the mempool, well, Wiz's mempool up. So like there's something going on the video screen. It's just not our faces, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I like this
That's
too.
like the trade-off. That's the trade-off balance I took here.
Or show like on Rod's podcast on Building with Bitcoin,
It's a screen
it's a
share.
screen share.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you can pull things up and look at stuff without showing any
exactly.
faces. So there's still something to do there.
Yeah, I mean, we had a long conversation about this exact conversation before we launched that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a cool balance that he did.
Yeah, it's really nice. And it works well for the format of his pod, like showing what people are building.
I actually get Marty has been giving me a lot of shit on Rabbit Hole Recap because he uses like a really nice like 4K camera, and I'm using like a $30 webcam, and the reason is because I still to this day do not feel comfortable on camera, and I like that it's intentionally poor quality.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, my trade-off is you're still gonna see me, but you're gonna see me a little bit blurry. It's not gonna be
Marty and a handful of pixels do a pod.
He's like, "Matt, is it a cost thing? Like, I'll buy you the camera." It's like, "No, I like
Yeah,
my
it's a
webcam." Dude, this has been a fucking awesome conversation. I think the freaks will find it very helpful. Um, Before we wrap up, I like to end it with some final thoughts.
Yeah, I guess my final thought would be start a meetup or join your local one. I think there's a lot more to in-person Bitcoin than meeting up at a bar and chatting with people. There's a lot coming out of this. A lot of circular economy, workshops, education, good friendships. I mean, like you said about having a family, after this trip, I now feel like I have a family around the world because not only have I met and stayed with a lot of Bitcoiners in the US, but Bitcoiners all around the world have seen what I've done. And now that's the first thing I think when I'm going somewhere. Where are the Bitcoiners? Because I want to meet them. They're going to be my local guides to the area and the people who I get to know the culture of that area, what I want to do in that area, and just have a friend on the ground. It's an incredible network.
I co-sign that. Go to a local Bitcoin meetup. If you don't have one, start one. Um, if you do have one, you could still consider starting one. And Bitcoiners, it does feel like a family all around the world.
Hmm.
Actually, I have one more question for you before we wrap up. To Bitcoiners that are considering learning how to ride a bike, what is your recommendation there?
Okay, so I had kind of a strange route to learning to ride. I got a motorcycle license in the US, but never had a motorcycle. So I did it's called MSF, Motorcycle Safety Foundation course. And it basically teaches you how to roll off zero and get to 20 miles an hour. It's doesn't and kind of lean over and do slow speed stuff. Doesn't really teach you how to ride a motorcycle. I think only experience can do that. As soon as I got the license, I moved abroad and I started riding in Southeast Asia. And that looks like a terrible place to learn, incredible place to learn. It's much, much, much safer for motorcycles than the
Really?
US.
Because there's just so many motorcycles? Is that
There's
why?
so many motorcycles. I think a lot of it is the kind of instinctual psychology of riding other people riding motorcycles. Since most people are on a motorcycle, most people are in a t-shirt and shorts with flip-flops and barely a helmet on, if a helmet at all.
Right.
Sometimes they got a whole family on their back. So they have as much, if not more, to lose by hitting you than you have from hitting them or from you two colliding. So people are just
Rather
much
than
more
like
aware.
F-150 that can just like knock you off the road and
Yeah,
knock you to
driving in
shreds.
Dallas, you got F-150s just going 90 while they're
Yeah.
texting because they don't care. They're
Right.
gonna be totally fine if they run over a
That's
Prius
interesting.
or they run over you. They're not even gonna notice if they hit you on
So
a
your main
motorcycle.
advice for someone who wants to get started with motorcycles is to go to Southeast Asia and learn
Is to
there.
move halfway around the world. I mean, you can learn in the US too. I would say just go out of cities, go out into the country and
Right.
learn on country roads where the drivers are give you a little more space. There's more room to breathe. Don't try and learn on the 405 in LA.
Right.
That's not the place to do
You're
it.
just gonna die.
Yeah, you're gonna injure yourself.
Yeah.
And invest in the safety equipment. It's worth it, even if like, hopefully you never have to use it, but get a jacket. You can get jeans with pads in them that have Kevlar, so if you slide out, you're fine. Because normal jeans, if you slide out on the highway, they will burn out in about 2 seconds, and then
Yeah.
you're right on skin. Get boots, gloves, at least gloves and a helmet, and ride with that every time you ride, and, that's the best that you can do to
Awesome.
help yourself if you do
And
crash.
have some kind of Bitcoin plan in place in case of head injury.
Yeah. Yeah, get your ducks in a row.
Yeah. Awesome, Sid. This is fucking fire conversation. I wanna thank you again,
Thank
for
you.
joining me, and, it's always a pleasure kicking it with you. I'm sure we're gonna have many good moments in the future in person, face to face, which
Yeah.
is awesome. I wanna thank all the freaks for joining us in the live chat and who continue to support the show. Reminder, I will be going live with Rockstar in the studio in about 2 hours, and we'll be talking about a bunch of different things, including the Tornado Cash sanctions. So be sure to join us for that. Appreciate you all. Stay humble, stack